Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Morning Bible. Wonderful, as always, to have you. Yesterday, you'll remember, we had Peter denying Jesus. So it had been predicted by Jesus that Peter would deny him 3 times before the rooster would crow. Yesterday, we saw that actually happening. It's quite sort of a challenging passage because it's one of those things where you're the whole way through you're willing Peter not to fall into this trap, not to fall away from Jesus, but he does. But it's actually an encouragement if you look at the whole story, and God turns it around, even though it's a bad thing, and God doesn't do bad things, program us to do bad things. It's a bad thing that God then, because of his grace, turns into something good at the end, and you see that happening in people's lives all the time. But we haven't quite got to that stage yet. For now, the attention turns back to Jesus for quite a while, and sort of the legal processes that Jesus goes through. And I'd say legal processes very lightly, because in reality these people who are condemning him are really breaking the law and just taking it into their own hands to get their own ways. So let's just jump into it. We're going to finish chapter 22 today, and tomorrow we'll start off chapter 23. It says, from verse 63, "Now the men who were holding Jesus in custody were mocking him as they beat him. They also blindfolded him and kept asking him, 'Prophesy, who is it that struck you?' And then they said many other things, blaspheming him." So Jesus is being held. It tells us there that it's just men who are holding Jesus. So we're to assume that this isn't the high priests or the chief priests or anything. This is kind of the temple security. These are the hired muscle that are working for these guys. So we've got this group of people who are holding Jesus. And they're mocking him and beating him, which is something that Jesus had predicted earlier on, back in I think chapter 9 or something. Jesus says, they're going to beat me and they're going to kill me. And so this is the part where they're beating him, and so they're holding him blindfolded, and they're taking turns hitting him, and they're saying, "Hey, if you're the Son of God, if you're so special, you could prophesy. Who's the one hitting you? Who's the one who just punched you? Take a guess. Which one of us just hit you?" And by the sounds of things, Jesus isn't rising to that bait, because Jesus tells us throughout, you shall not test God, things like that. And so they're just hitting him, but Jesus submits to it. And it says they said many other things against him, blaspheming him. So there's a level of irony here, because Jesus is being arrested for blasphemy. Blasphemy is when you're sort of speaking out against God. You're taking the name of God in vain. You're saying things that aren't true about God. You're criticizing God. You're, all sorts of things. You're just saying negative things towards God. That's what these people are doing to Jesus. So ironically, even though Jesus is being condemned for blaspheming because he's claiming to be the Son of God, he's actually telling the truth, and it's the people who are beating him and mocking him and are putting him on trial. Those are the people blaspheming him because he is the Son of God, and they're mocking him for it. So then he gets taken before the council. So let's jump ahead and read that bit today as well. So it's from verse 66. It says, "When day came, the assembly of elders of the people gathered together, both chief priests and scribes, and they led him away to their council." So a group of an assembly of elders gathered. So all of the sort of elders from the temple. So we've got chief priests, we've got scribes, we've got the guys who write the law, basically. In other gospels, they're called the Sanhedrin. But for all intents and purposes, these guys are the guys who are in charge of the temple in Jerusalem. So there was a note actually on yesterday's video that I forgot to say. Peter was sort of picked out in the crowd for being Galilean. They noticed that Peter was Galilean, and that was because he would have had a different accent to everyone else. He would have had a slightly different skin tone and a different accent, and sort of different way of speaking. And so even though they were speaking the same language, he was very noticeably from a specific other region. And so they knew that Jesus was from Galilee, and so when they saw that Peter was from Galilee as well, they called him out on it, and they sort of criticised him for it. And so to an extent you see the same kind of rejection of someone else coming into their temple. These guys are very much Jerusalem based, and they think Jerusalem is sort of the holy city and all the rest of it, which it was in Jewish scripture. But Jesus has come in and said, actually there's a new rule now about how this is all run. But they don't want to accept that because Jesus is coming as an outsider and Jesus is challenging their status quo. And so they took him to the council, and in front of this council they said, "If you are the Christ, tell us." So they're essentially saying, look, if you're the Messiah, if you're the one who's predicted, you're the Son of God, tell us that now. The reason why they're trying to get that out of him is because as soon as Jesus says that, they can say that he's been blaspheming. They can arrest him, they can put him to death, because he's been making claims that aren't true about God. So they're trying to get Jesus to say that. But Jesus said to them, "If I tell you, you will not believe. And if I ask you, you will not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man shall be seated at the right hand of the power of God." And so Jesus doesn't answer their question directly. He says to them, "If I tell you, you will not believe. And if I ask you, you will not answer." So Jesus is refusing to play their games. The reason for that is actually from right earlier on. It was either the start of chapter 22 or the start of chapter... So it's the start of chapter 22 where it says, "Now the feast of unleavened bread drew near, which is called Passover, and the chief priests and scribes were seeking how to put him to death, for they feared the people." So you remember a few videos ago now, I said they were seeking how they put him to death. They weren't seeking why they could, they weren't looking for reasons, they weren't looking for kind of, to have a fair trial at all. They'd already made up their mind. They were just figuring out how they would kill him. And so this is where we see that Jesus knows that that's their mindset, and so he's saying, "Look, I'm not going to buy into what game you're playing. I'm not going to give you answers because you've already made up your mind. If I tell you that I'm Christ, you won't believe me. You put me to death. If I tell you that I'm not, then that's not true." So Jesus wouldn't do that. He says, "If I ask you, you will not answer." So if he asks them whether he's Christ, they won't give that. They won't give that as an answer. But he does say something though. He says, "But from now on the Son of Man shall be seated at the right hand of the power of God." So Jesus is referred to himself as the Son of Man throughout the book of Luke. It's a title that he's picked up from the Old Testament. It's mentioned a lot in Daniel especially. Jesus has taken on this title, and he's saying here, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God. So if God's in his throne room, Jesus will be sat at his right hand. He's going to be sort of, the right-hand man is a phrase that we still use to this day. It's your accomplice. It's, I would say, partner in crime, but it's God, so there isn't any crime there. But you know what I mean. It's, he is sat there in God's throne room, and he's saying that's where he's going to be very soon. But he says that without actually answering that question. He doesn't say he is the Son of Man. He just talks about the Son of Man. And so all the people in the council, they pick up on this, and it says, "So they all said, 'Are you the Son of God then?'" So they hear Jesus say the Son of Man, and they say, "Ah, there you go, you're the Son of God. You've just claimed to be the Son of God. Are you the Son of God then?" And Jesus says to them, "You say that I am." So Jesus' answer to that is, that's what you've just said. That's what you just said I am. He didn't say I am. He didn't say I'm not. He just said, "You say that I am the Son of God." And then all the people, they take that as an answer. They think that's enough evidence. They say, "What further testimony do we need? We have heard it ourselves from his own lips." Could you imagine a trial where that's the evidence? They need to put someone to death. If someone was in the courtroom for sort of murder, and one of the lawyers asks, "You've killed this person, haven't you?" And the person replies, "Well, you say that I have." Could you imagine a jury taking that as evidence, as conclusive evidence, and the only evidence they have to put someone to death? It's completely crazy. But you can see that they've already made up their mind. This council's already made up their mind. And so this is all the evidence they need to then take Jesus up to the higher authorities, which we'll get into tomorrow. But for now, I hope you all have a wonderful day. The pace is really starting to speed up in this, but I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Much love. Bye bye bye.